I met Lauren in the most unexpected place, the waiting room of a dentist's office. I was flipping through a magazine I had no interest in, just trying to kill time, and she sat down across from me with a coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. She looked busy, distracted, but then the receptionist called out a name, and we both stood up at the same time. Turns out, they double-booked the slot. That mix-up turned into a conversation, and that conversation turned into coffee, 2 blocks down the street. She had a calm way about her, but you could tell she was always thinking. She worked in fashion, mostly freelance design work, and had this practical creativity, like someone who understood how to make things both beautiful and functional. I was more of a behind-the-scenes guy, working in IT consulting. Nothing flashy, but steady, predictable. We were different in a lot of ways, but it felt easy, natural. Our first few dates were unplanned and honest. We didn't do the big romantic gestures. We got tacos, walked around second-hand bookstores, watched old movies with terrible audio just because she said they had real texture. I liked how comfortable everything felt, how nothing needed to be perfect to matter. We moved in together after a little over a year. Rented a 2-bedroom apartment just outside the city, nothing fancy, but it had big windows and a kitchen she immediately claimed as hers. She filled it with jars, spices, labels, and little bowls that seemed to have no purpose but looked great anyway. I set up my workspace in the spare room and tried not to get in the way. We found a rhythm without even meaning to. Marriage came naturally. We didn't need a big discussion. It just felt like the next right step. We had a small wedding in her parents' backyard. String lights, mismatched chairs, music from a speaker she controlled with her phone. I remember looking around that night and realizing how lucky I was. How everything we'd built felt like ours. Now we're a few years into it. We live in a quiet neighborhood with old trees and friendly neighbors. Our house is small, but it's ours. She's turned it into something warm, filled with colors I would have never picked but now can't imagine living without. On weekends, we cook together or wander through hardware stores for reasons we forget as soon as we get there. She still makes me laugh with no effort. I still find new reasons to like her. We don't have everything figured out, but we've built a life that feels full and honest. And most days, that's more than enough. One of the things I've always appreciated about life with Lauren is how much of it just works. It's not flashy or dramatic, just a kind of calm consistency that feels rare these days. We wake up to the same alarm, hit the same light switches, and move around each other in the mornings like we've been doing this forever. She always heads to the kitchen first, barefoot, hair still a mess from sleep, mumbling about needing coffee before language. I'll usually follow a few minutes later. I take care of Baxter, our rescue mutt with the laziest stretch you've ever seen, and then we eat breakfast together, usually standing in the kitchen. She reads emails, I scroll the news. We trade sarcastic comments, eye rolls, and the occasional kiss between toast and mugs. There's a comfort in it that I never take for granted. We both work from home most days, which probably wouldn't work for everyone, but somehow it suits us. Lauren turns the spare room into a mini studio when she has design work, fabric samples pinned up, her sewing machine buzzing, music playing just loud enough to spill through the walls. I work out of the converted garage, quieter, more screens than style. We don't bother each other, but we check in. Lunch together. The occasional come look at this moment from either side of the house. She likes color. Our house shows it: pillows, rugs, wall art that changes seasonally. I would have picked grays and blues if left on my own, but Lauren has this way of making spaces feel like someone actually lives in them. Not just decor, but warmth. She lights candles in the evening, plays soft music while she cooks, talks to Baxter like he's a roommate. The energy she brings into a space is something I didn't even know I needed until I had it. Weekends are when we really slow down. Saturday mornings usually mean pancakes, pajamas until noon, and debates over whether we're being productive or just lazy. We like driving out to farmers markets, poking through old record stores, or even just walking around the neighborhood with coffee. We talk about everything, about nothing. Future vacation ideas, new books, what color to paint the bathroom. We have friends over sometimes, small dinner parties with a little too much wine, board games that go on longer than they should. Our families come by, too, especially around holidays. Lauren loves decorating for them. She plans the menus days in advance and always insists we do a full clean of the house, even though her mom never notices. We're not in a rush for anything. Kids are a maybe someday conversation we revisit every now and then. We've talked about names, but nothing serious. Just ideas. Dreams, really. For now, we're just living together. And that's enough. It's not a perfect life, but it's one I love. One we made side by side from the ground up. By the third year of our marriage, things had settled into a rhythm that felt not just comfortable, but solid. Not every day was perfect, of course, but there was something incredibly satisfying about knowing what to expect, not in a boring way, but in a dependable one. Our lives had texture, patterns, the kind of familiarity you only get from living closely with someone for long enough to see them in every mood. Lauren had a way of filling time, even when nothing needed doing. She rearranged furniture on quiet afternoons, reorganized kitchen drawers just because, and somehow managed to make every corner of our house look like a page from a lifestyle magazine. And yet, she never made it feel untouchable. Her style was always warm, never showy. I loved watching her work, when she was in her zone, sketching ideas or holding up fabric swatches to the light like they could tell her a secret. I'd sit nearby sometimes, half listening while answering emails or tinkering with one of my home automation projects. We didn't need to talk constantly to feel connected. Her presence was enough. Evenings were my favorite. After dinner, usually something she improvised from whatever was in the fridge, we'd either sprawl on the couch or sit outside on the back patio with a drink, watching the sky fade from gold to charcoal. We talked about dumb things. Sometimes serious things. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Just sat, hand in hand, content with the silence. Every few weeks, we'd do something spontaneous. She'd book us a weekend cabin on a Thursday and say, "Pack light, we leave tomorrow." Or I'd surprise her with tickets to a small local concert. We made it a point to keep life interesting, even in small ways. Lauren never liked routine for too long. She liked moments that felt like detours, even if we always came home to the same place. We traveled when we could. Short trips. A week in Asheville. A few days upstate visiting friends. Nothing extravagant, but meaningful. Lauren was one of those travelers who carried snacks, a book, and 3 playlists for every mood. I handled logistics, boarding passes, driving routes. We balanced each other. Looking back, those years were warm, grounded. We celebrated anniversaries with simple dinners and long toasts. We took photos, but not too many. We weren't trying to prove anything to the world, just to each other. She called me her anchor. I called her my spark. It worked. At least, it seemed to. I used to think that kind of life, steady, loving, real, was unshakable. That if you put in the effort, stayed honest, built trust like a wall one brick at a time, nothing could really threaten it. I didn't know then what was coming, but at the time, I was sure. We had everything in place. The night our son was born was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty, but the kind that fills a room completely. The hospital lights were low, the hallway sounds muffled, and in the center of it all was Lauren, cradling this impossibly tiny boy like the whole world had just reset. We named him Noah. It was her choice, though I loved it too. She said it sounded strong, but soft. I remember holding him that first night, watching his eyes flicker open for just a second, and feeling something settle in my chest that I didn't even know had been restless before. The first few weeks were chaotic in the usual ways: sleepless nights, feeding schedules, laundry piling up in corners. But Lauren was radiant. Tired, yes, but beautiful in a way that only new mothers seem to be. She would hum to him while walking around the living room in the early hours of the morning. Sometimes I'd wake up and just listen to her moving through the house in the dark, like she was part of the rhythm of something ancient and real. People say having a baby changes your relationship, and that's true. But for a while, it felt like it had changed us for the better. We were a team, trading off shifts, texting each other photos even when we were in the same house. I started working from home more often just to be close. We joked about who the baby looked like. Her eyes, we agreed. My hands. Her hair. The smile, too early to tell. But then, little things started to shift. Lauren was tired, understandably so, but there was something else beneath it. A distraction. Some days she'd be perfectly present, full of that vibrant energy I'd always loved. Other days she seemed somewhere else. Not withdrawn in a dramatic way, just slightly out of sync. Like her body was there, but her attention had to fight to stay. I chalked it up to hormones, sleep deprivation, the overwhelming swirl of new parenthood. I told myself not to read too much into it. And maybe I wouldn't have, if it hadn't been for the way she sometimes answered my questions too quickly, like she was ready with a script. Or the way she started locking her phone, even though we'd never had that kind of boundary before. I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't want to seem paranoid. And honestly, I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. Besides, Noah was growing, smiling, holding onto fingers. His laugh, soft and sudden, became the sound I looked forward to most. And Lauren, for all her fluctuations, was still a good mother. She held him close, sang to him, knew his patterns before I did. We were exhausted, but we were a family. I didn't know then that I'd look back on that time and question everything I saw. The strange thing is, life didn't suddenly change, it drifted. That's how it happens, I think. It's not a shattering sound. It's the quiet creak of a foundation shifting under your feet, slow enough that you wonder if it's all in your head. Lauren was still Lauren. She smiled, held Noah, laughed at the same dumb jokes I made when I was running on 4 hours of sleep. But there was a pause now, just the slightest hesitation behind her eyes sometimes. Like she was holding something in, or holding something back. The warmth hadn't vanished, but it didn't reach as far as it used to. I kept telling myself it was normal. We were parents now. We were exhausted. We hadn't had a proper date night in months. Maybe this was just the phase everyone talks about, the one where you forget how to be a couple because you're so busy being a family. But even in the quiet hours when it was just the two of us and Noah was asleep, something felt off. She was always on her phone. Always. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and catch the soft glow of her screen under the blanket. She'd glance at me, smile a little, and say something like, just a baby article, or texting Jess, she can't sleep either. And maybe that was true. But she never handed me her phone like she used to. Never showed me the messages or memes or photos. There was a new layer of privacy that hadn't been there before. She started spending more time out of the house, visiting friends, running errands that used to take 30 minutes and now stretched to 2 hours. Sometimes she'd come back distracted, flushed, like her mind had been somewhere I wasn't invited. I asked if everything was okay. Not directly, just casual questions. You seem tired lately. Is everything all right with work? She always had answers, too perfect and too quick. I'm just adjusting to being a mom. Just scatterbrained. Maybe I need a day to myself. Would that be okay? Of course it was okay. I wanted her to have space. But I also wanted to understand what was pulling her so far away from me. And then there were the little lies. I knew her too well not to catch them. Saying she'd been at the store when I saw the car mileage didn't match the trip. Saying she had lunch with her sister when her sister posted photos from a different city that day. Nothing major. Just misalignments. Gaps. Still, I didn't accuse. I didn't even know what I'd be accusing her of. It wasn't like I had some big, dramatic reason to doubt her. But my instincts had started whispering, and I couldn't seem to quiet them anymore. I told myself it was stress, that she needed time, that I needed to trust her more. But the truth is, I was starting to wonder if I'd already lost something. I just didn't know what it was yet. The thing that kept me awake at night wasn't anything loud or obvious. It wasn't screaming, or fighting, or doors slamming. It was the silence. The kind of silence that hums beneath the surface of everyday life. You start noticing it in the small gaps, when she stops asking about your day, when the way she says, I love you starts to sound like she's reading it from a script she memorized a long time ago. Lauren and I were still functioning. We woke up, changed diapers, brewed coffee, shared polite smiles across the table. From the outside, I'm sure we looked fine, but the rhythm had shifted. She laughed less, reached for my hand less, started leaving the house at odd hours under vague explanations. I didn't know what I was even looking for, but I kept mentally filing away every small inconsistency like I was preparing for a conversation I didn't know how to start. One evening, she told me she had to run out and meet a friend, an old colleague she hadn't seen in years. She looked nice. Too nice. Hair done, makeup on, a fitted jacket she hadn't worn in months. I said nothing, but I watched the way she avoided eye contact as she grabbed her keys and kissed me on the cheek. That kiss was hollow. It barely touched my skin. I remember standing there in the doorway after she left, holding Noah against my chest, wondering how someone could still feel so far away when they were just 10 inches from your face. I stayed up late that night. Not because I was waiting for her. I told myself I wasn't. But because my brain wouldn't quiet down. She came back after midnight, claiming the friend had gone through a breakup and needed to talk. I nodded. I even said I hoped she was okay. But I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to hear the answers she was ready to give me. I started noticing that she guarded her phone more closely now. She never left it unattended. If I walked into the room and she was texting, she'd lock it with a quick tap and pretend to be doing something else. Once or twice, I saw a name pop up I didn't recognize, just initials. She said it was someone from a mom group. Another time, she said it was a work contact. Always casual. always ready. But what began to wear me down wasn't just the lying, or what I suspected was lying. It was how normal she made it all seem. Like she'd practiced this version of herself. Like she was fluent in a language I had only just started to hear. I didn't confront her. I didn't want to accuse her without something real. I kept telling myself that maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe I was just tired, overworked, stretched too thin between the baby and the sleepless nights. But a voice inside me, calm, not panicked, kept asking the same question: what if you're not imagining it? I didn't know it then, but that quiet voice was getting ready to lead me to a truth I wasn't prepared for. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who took a DNA test behind his wife's back. It felt like something out of a movie, paranoid, invasive, extreme. And for weeks, I pushed the thought aside every time it surfaced. I hated the idea of it, hated what it said about me, and even more, what it might say about her. But it wouldn't go away. There wasn't one big moment that pushed me over the edge. No dramatic slip-up, no shocking clue. It was the accumulation of all the little things, the distance, the half-truths, the odd glances, and especially the way she looked at Noah. It was subtle, but I saw it. Sometimes she held him like she was trying to protect something too closely. Other times, she seemed uncertain. I can't explain it, not clearly. Just a gut feeling, like a thread that didn't quite match the fabric of our life. I ordered the kit online. It arrived in an unmarked envelope that I tucked into my desk drawer and didn't open for 3 more days. I kept staring at it, like touching it would confirm I'd crossed some invisible line I couldn't come back from. But eventually, late one night when Lauren was asleep and the house was still, I swabbed the inside of Noah's cheek, sealed the sample, and dropped it off the next morning on my way to work. Waiting for the results was like living underwater. Everything looked the same on the surface. Our morning routines, our quiet dinners, the quick hugs exchanged between work and baby feedings. But beneath it all, my thoughts were loud. Restless. I started noticing every detail more closely. The curve of Noah's chin, the color of his eyes. I kept asking myself if I was just seeing what I wanted to see, or what I was afraid to see. Lauren didn't know, of course. She moved through the days with that same half-present energy, offering just enough affection to keep me second-guessing myself. If she sensed a shift in me, she didn't mention it. Or maybe she just didn't want to ask. We barely talked about anything real anymore. Conversations stuck to the surface: who needed groceries, who was waking up for the next diaper change, who had errands to run. We moved like polite roommates parenting a child together. I started spending more time at work, even when I didn't have to. Sometimes I'd just sit in the car outside our house before going inside, trying to remember what it used to feel like to come home and know everything was okay. The results were supposed to take a week. That week stretched endlessly. I checked my email obsessively, even though I knew they'd notify me the second the report was ready. And still, every time I logged in and didn't see anything, I felt both relief and dread. I hadn't told anyone. Not a soul. It was my secret, my burden. I didn't even know what I wanted the results to say. Part of me prayed it would confirm everything was fine, and I'd feel ashamed, even guilty. Another part of me just wanted the guessing to stop, no matter what it revealed. When the email finally came, I stared at it for almost an hour before clicking it open. I hadn't read the results yet, but I already felt like I knew what they would say. The results came in on a Tuesday. I opened the email at my desk, in the dim office light just after 6 p.m., when the building had mostly emptied out. I hadn't planned to open it there, but something about the silence made it feel like the right place to do it. No baby monitor buzzing, no Lauren humming in the kitchen. Just me, my screen, and the answer I thought I wanted. The message was simple. A polite header from the testing company. A link. I clicked it. It took less than 30 seconds to read. One bolded line in a sea of sterile white space. Probability of paternity, 0%. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink for a moment. I just sat there, reading it over and over, as if repetition might somehow change the words. But it didn't. They stayed the same. Clear. Cold. Final. Noah wasn't mine. The boy I'd fed at 3 a.m., rocked to sleep, kissed on the forehead every night, the boy I'd looked at and tried to see pieces of myself in, he wasn't my son. Not biologically. Not in the way I'd always assumed without question. And suddenly, every quiet moment, every odd glance, every vague answer Lauren had given me made sense in a horrifying, perfect way. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That came later. What hit first was numbness, grief, a thick, heavy ache that spread through my chest and settled in my stomach like a stone. I'd been living in a story I didn't write, playing a part in a life someone else had orchestrated behind my back. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly, circling side streets and neighborhoods I didn't recognize. I thought about the first time I held Noah, the first time he gripped my finger, the way Lauren had looked at me when she said, "He's perfect, isn't he?" I thought about that moment and felt something in me snap. Later that night, when I finally walked through the front door, Lauren was already asleep on the couch, Noah asleep in the bassinet next to her. The house was quiet, peaceful even. You'd never guess something so ugly was hiding beneath it. I stood there for a long time, just watching her, wondering who she really was, wondering when she had decided to lie to me, wondering if she had ever planned to tell me at all. I didn't wake her. I didn't say a word. Instead, I packed a small bag, just enough clothes for a few days, grabbed my laptop, important documents, a few things that mattered. I moved mechanically, quietly, careful not to disturb her. I transferred every dollar from our joint accounts into my private one. Hers too. I took both sets of car keys because both cars were in my name. I left everything else. On the kitchen table, I placed the test results in an envelope. Nothing else. No note. No message. Just the truth. And then I walked out. My phone buzzed 3 times that night. Her name. No voicemail. Just missed calls. I didn't answer. I haven't answered since. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. The strange thing about betrayal is how it strips away all the expected reactions. You imagine screaming, smashing things, some cathartic breakdown. But in reality, it's quieter, emptier. Like the part of you that could hurt just shuts off. I stared at the ceiling of the motel room I'd checked into, just a cheap, forgettable place off the highway, and let the silence do what it needed to do. The money was the first thing I took. Our savings account was gone within minutes. I moved every dollar into an account with my name alone. We built that fund over years, vacation savings, emergency stash, money set aside for someday. I took all of it. I don't feel bad. That money was earned in a marriage I thought was real. If she wanted to start over with a lie, she could do it broke. Then came the cars, both registered in my name. She didn't know that because I handled all the paperwork, the registrations, the insurance. It was easier that way. One trip to the app, and I locked her key fob remotely. Both vehicles were now with me. No access. No warning. Just another rug pulled out from under her. The apartment? I left it as it was, but I shut off access to the online rent payments, froze the utilities, and canceled her streaming subscriptions, all of which were under my login, my cards. I wanted her to feel it. Not out of spite. Out of justice. Out of the unbearable need for her to understand, even for a second, the depth of what she'd done. I changed my number the next day. Made sure my new account details were tied to a phone she could never call again. I told no one where I was. Not my parents, not my closest friends. I left the city with just the essentials, packed the car, and drove until I didn't recognize the street names anymore. Her texts started coming in afternoon. The first one just said, "Where are you?" Then, "We need to talk," followed by a dozen missed calls and increasingly desperate messages. I didn't open any of them. I didn't block her either. Let her watch those texts sit unread. Let the silence speak the truth I no longer needed to explain. I know what she was probably doing in that moment, piecing it together. She would have seen the envelope on the table, opened it, and read those 4 words that changed everything. Probability of paternity, 0%. She would have known that I knew. She would have looked around at the quiet apartment, the missing car, the dead payment portals, and realized that the version of me she thought she could lie to was gone. I imagined she cried. I imagined she begged the air for a rewind button. But none of that matters now. She made her choice. And I made mine. It took weeks before the quiet started to feel safe again. The first days after I left, I barely spoke to anyone. I kept my phone on silent, ignored the persistent messages from unknown numbers, blocked every contact I didn't recognize. I wasn't running, I was shedding, leaving behind the noise of a life that had turned out to be false. Every hour that passed without her voice or her presence felt like breathing clean air after too long in a smoke-filled room. I found a small town a few hours out, just far enough to be unfamiliar, just quiet enough to feel like starting over. I rented a short-term place, furnished, no strings. A clean space with nothing on the walls and nothing in the drawers. I needed that. I needed a place that held none of our memories. I started working remotely full-time. I told my boss I needed a change of pace, and he respected it. The work was grounding spreadsheets, system builds, clients who didn't know me beyond a Zoom window. It gave me routine, and routine gave me stability. The hardest part was adjusting to life without Noah. Not because of the paternity test, I had accepted that painful truth, but because I loved him. He didn't ask to be born into this mess. He didn't choose who his father was. I still think about the way his tiny hand would wrap around my finger, the way he'd look up at me, all trust, no doubt. Losing him was a different kind of heartbreak, one I carried quietly, without ceremony. I don't think I'll ever forget him. But even in the grieving, life kept moving. One afternoon, I stopped by a local bookstore. I wasn't looking for anything, just wandering, letting my thoughts settle. That's where I met Elise. She was stocking a display, humming softly to herself. She glanced up and smiled, and something about it disarmed me. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't forced. It was real. We started talking. Books, then music, then small things that didn't feel so small once they were said aloud. I told her I was new in town. She told me she liked quiet people. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Our first few conversations were short, casual. But over time, they stretched. We had coffee one Saturday, then dinner the next. Elise was calm, thoughtful. Nothing about her reminded me of Lauren, and that was exactly what I needed. She didn't pry, didn't push. She just listened and offered pieces of herself gently, without expectation. I haven't told her everything. Not yet. But I will. For now, I'm just letting it grow. Slowly. No labels, no assumptions. Just two people trying to be kind to each other in a world that rarely makes it easy. Sometimes I catch myself smiling for no reason. Not because everything's perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, nothing feels fake. It's strange how quickly life reshapes itself when you let it. There are days now when I almost forget what it felt like to live under the weight of doubt. Days when I go hours, sometimes entire afternoons, without thinking about Lauren or the way she looked at me with a straight face while our life cracked beneath us. The pain isn't gone, but it's been folded into something quieter, something that no longer rules me. I still think about Noah. Sometimes I wonder what he'll grow up knowing, if he'll hear a version of me filtered through her guilt, or if she'll ever tell him the truth. It's not my place anymore. I've made peace with that. But he was part of my life, and there's a corner of my heart that will always hold space for him. That love was real, even if everything else around it wasn't. Lauren never stopped trying to reach me, at least for a while. The texts turned into emails. The emails became long letters, mailed to my parents' house, each one a different mix of apology, confusion, and justification. I didn't read most of them. The few I did only reminded me why I left. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. There's a difference. I haven't responded. I don't think I ever will. As for Elise, things are simple, and that's what I need. She doesn't try to fix me, doesn't treat me like I'm broken. She just listens. She brings coffee in the mornings and lets me hold her hand when I don't feel like talking. With her, everything is quiet, but in a way that feels safe, not empty. I don't know what our future looks like. I'm not rushing to define it. For now, we read together, go on slow walks, and talk about everything and nothing. And in that stillness, I found something I thought I lost a long time ago, myself. I look back at my marriage and I don't feel shame. I gave everything I had. I was present, loyal, honest. And that matters more than the ending. Because in the end, I didn't walk away with bitterness. I walked away with clarity. The truth didn't destroy me, it freed me. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not surviving. I'm living.